Abstract. Organizations worldwide face unprecedented pressure to adapt workforce capabilities amid accelerating technological change and evolving work demands. This article synthesizes recent empirical evidence on skill transformation dynamics, examining both organizational and individual consequences of skill shifts. Drawing on large scale survey data, meta analytic findings, and longitudinal research, the analysis reveals that skill half lives have compressed significantly, with technical competencies becoming obsolete in 2 to 3 years, while foundational capabilities maintain relevance across decades. Organizations that proactively address skill gaps through evidence based interventions, including transparent skill mapping, capability building ecosystems, distributed learning architectures, and purpose driven development frameworks, demonstrate superior adaptation outcomes. The article presents concrete organizational examples across manufacturing, healthcare, financial services, and technology sectors, offering actionable guidance for leaders navigating workforce transformation while maintaining employee well-being and competitive performance. Introduction. The velocity of skill transformation has fundamentally altered the employment compact. What workers learned 5 years ago may bear limited relevance to tomorrow's role requirements. Recent evidence suggests that skill requirements for individual jobs have changed by approximately 25% since 2015, with projections indicating this figure could reach 65% by 2030. World Economic Forum, 2025. This represents not merely incremental adjustment, but wholesale reconfiguration of workforce capabilities. The practical stakes extend beyond individual career trajectories. Organizations unable to align workforce skills with evolving operational demands face competitive erosion, reduced innovation capacity, and deteriorating employee engagement. Conversely, those that systematically address skill transformation through evidence based approaches demonstrate measurable performance advantages, including enhanced adaptability, improved retention, and accelerated innovation cycles. Three converging forces drive this acceleration. First, technological advancement, particularly in artificial intelligence and automation, continuously reshapes task allocation between human and machine capabilities. OECD 2024. Second, macroeconomic shifts, including demographic transitions and supply chain reconfigurations, alter labor market structures. World Economic Forum 2025. Third, evolving stakeholder expectations around sustainability, equity, and social responsibility create new capability requirements across organizational functions. This article examines the organizational challenge of skill transformation through an evidence based lens, drawing on recent empirical research to characterize the landscape, quantify consequences, and identify effective responses. The analysis integrates findings from workplace surveys, meta analyses, longitudinal studies, and organizational case examples to provide actionable guidance for practitioners navigating workforce adaptation. The skill transformation landscape, defining skill obsolescence and skill gaps in contemporary organizations. Skill obsolescence occurs when previously valuable capabilities lose relevance due to technological, market, or organizational changes. This differs from skill gaps, the discrepancy between required and available capabilities, though the phenomena often co occur. Research distinguishes between technical obsolescence, decay of occupation specific knowledge, and economic obsolescence, diminished market value of existing skills. OECD 2024. Contemporary skill transformation manifests across multiple dimensions. Technical skill decay. Domain specific competencies lose applicability as tools, platforms, and methodologies evolve. Capability requirements expansion. Roles increasingly demand broader skill combinations, blending technical expertise with interpersonal and cognitive capabilities. Skill half life compression. The duration for which learned capabilities retain full utility has shortened dramatically across most occupational categories. Cross functional skill integration. Previously specialized competencies now require integration with capabilities from adjacent domains. The National Research Council's framework distinguishes three skill categories experiencing differential transformation rates: cognitive skills, processing information, reasoning, remembering, interpersonal skills, managing behavior and emotions, and interpersonal skills, expressing ideas and interpreting others' messages. National Research Council, 2012. Evidence suggests cognitive and technical skills experience more rapid obsolescence than interpersonal and intrapersonal capabilities, though all categories face evolutionary pressure. Prevalence, drivers, and distribution of skill transformation. Large scale empirical evidence reveals the scope and distribution of skill transformation. World Economic Forum survey data covering 1,000 plus companies across 22 industry clusters and 55 economies indicates that 39% of existing worker skills will be disrupted by 2030, with 63% of employers identifying skill gaps as the primary barrier to business transformation. World Economic Forum, 2025. The drivers exhibit sector specific variation. Technology sectors, rapid platform evolution and emerging capabilities, AI, quantum computing, drive technical skill obsolescence cycles of 2 to 3 years. Manufacturing, automation integration, and digital twin technologies create hybrid skill requirements combining traditional craft knowledge with data analytics. Healthcare, telemedicine adoption, and diagnostic AI tools require clinicians to develop new patient interaction patterns and technology partnership skills. Financial services, regulatory technology, and algorithmic decision systems demand capabilities in compliance automation and ethical AI oversight. Skill transformation distributes unevenly across workforce segments. OECD analysis reveals that workers in routine intensive occupations face 14% higher probability of skill obsolescence compared to those in non routine roles. OECD 2024. Educational attainment correlates inversely with obsolescence risk, though recent evidence suggests even advanced degree holders experience significant skill disruption in technology adjacent fields. Geographic and demographic dimensions compound these patterns. Workers in smaller labor markets and those with caregiving responsibilities face reduced access to reskilling opportunities, exacerbating skill gap persistence. OECD 2024. Age related factors prove more nuanced than stereotypes suggest. While older workers may face higher initial learning curves for new technologies, meta analytic evidence shows that age explains minimal variance in training outcomes when controlling for prior experience and motivation. Schmidt and Hunter, 1998. Organizational and individual consequences of skill transformation. Organizational performance impacts. Skill misalignment generates measurable performance degradation across multiple organizational dimensions. Research examining the relationship between employee engagement and business outcomes reveals that organizations in the top quartile of employee engagement, which correlates strongly with perceived skill role alignment, demonstrate 21% higher profitability and 17% higher productivity than bottom quartile organizations. Harder and Schmidt, 2008. Innovation capacity suffers particularly acute effects. When workforce skills lag technological or market opportunities, organizations experience delayed technology adoption. Lacking internal capabilities to implement emerging tools, organizations face 6 to 18-month adoption lags relative to skill ready competitors. Reduced experimentation velocity. Teams without adequate skill diversity struggle to rapidly prototype and iterate, extending innovation cycles. Increased external dependency. Skill gaps force reliance on external consultants and vendors, raising costs while limiting institutional learning. Talent acquisition and retention metrics reveal additional consequences. Organizations perceived as providing insufficient development opportunities experience 25 to 40% higher voluntary turnover in high demand skill categories. This creates vicious cycles. Skill gaps drive turnover, which exacerbates gaps and increases replacement costs. Research indicates that replacing a skilled worker costs 100 to 300% of annual salary when accounting for lost productivity, recruitment expenses, and onboarding time. Heckman and Kotz, 2012. Customer and stakeholder impacts manifest through service quality degradation. When employees lack skills to effectively utilize available tools or navigate evolving customer expectations, satisfaction scores decline measurably. In healthcare contexts, research demonstrates that inadequate provider training on new electronic health record systems correlates with decreased patient satisfaction and increased medical errors during transition periods. Individual well-being and career impacts. Skill obsolescence creates psychological and economic consequences for individual workers. Research on person environment fit demonstrates that perceived skill inadequacy correlates with increased psychological distress, reduced job satisfaction, and elevated burnout risk. Newman et al., 2017. Workers experiencing skill obsolescence report heightened anxiety. Concerns about employment security and career prospects generate persistent stress. Diminished self efficacy. Repeated experiences of skill inadequacy erode confidence in learning capacity. Social comparison distress. Observing peers successfully adapting while struggling personally intensifies negative effect. Career trajectory uncertainty. Unclear pathways for skill renewal create planning paralysis. Economic impacts extend beyond potential job loss. Workers with obsolete skills face wage stagnation or decline even when maintaining employment. Research examining wage trajectories following technological disruptions reveals that affected workers experience 8 to 15% permanent wage reductions relative to counterfactual scenarios, with effects persisting 10 plus years post disruption. The psychological contract. Employees' beliefs about mutual obligations between themselves and employers experiences particular strain during skill transformation periods. When organizations fail to provide development opportunities after signaling employment stability, perceived contract breach correlates with sharp declines in organizational commitment and discretionary effort. This psychological contract violation affects not only individual well being, but also organizational citizenship, behaviors that sustain informal knowledge transfer and collaboration. Demographic factors moderate these impacts. Workers with caregiving responsibilities face compounded challenges balancing development activities with existing obligations. Research indicates that women, who disproportionately shoulder caregiving duties, experience reduced access to skill development opportunities despite equal or greater motivation to participate. OECD, 2024. Evidence based organizational responses. Transparent skill mapping and communication. Organizations that systematically assess and communicate skill requirements demonstrate superior adaptation outcomes. Evidence based skill mapping involves several components. Empirical approaches to skill assessment. Rather than relying solely on manager intuition or job descriptions, leading organizations employ multiple data sources, including task analysis, competency modeling, and skill adjacency mapping. Meta-analytic evidence demonstrates that structured job analysis methods yield more reliable skill requirements than unstructured approaches, improving subsequent selection and development interventions. Campion et al., 2011. Effective communication strategies. Skill transparency initiatives. Clearly articulating required capabilities, current workforce skill distributions, and identified gaps reduces uncertainty and enables informed employee decision making. Individualized skill dashboards, providing workers personalized views of their skill profiles relative to current and future role requirements, facilitates targeted development planning. Regular skill dialogues, structured conversations between employees and managers focused specifically on capability development, separate from performance evaluation, improve psychological safety and learning orientation. Future focused skill roadmaps. Communicating anticipated skill needs 12 to 24 months forward enables proactive rather than reactive development. Deloitte implemented a comprehensive skill mapping initiative across its 350,000 plus global workforce, creating detailed taxonomies of required capabilities and deploying individualized skill assessment tools. The initiative enabled employees to visualize skill gaps and access curated development resources, while providing the organization data driven insights for strategic workforce planning. Following implementation, Deloitte reported increased internal mobility rates and reduced external hiring costs as workers developed skills for lateral and vertical transitions. Capability building ecosystems. Rather than relying exclusively on formal training programs, evidence suggests that integrated learning ecosystems combining multiple development modalities prove most effective. Research on adult learning demonstrates that experiential, social, and formal learning contribute differentially to skill acquisition, with optimal outcomes emerging from deliberate combination. National Research Council, 2012. Components of effective capability building ecosystems. Experiential learning opportunities, stretch assignments, cross functional projects, and rotation programs that provide authentic practice with new capabilities under supportive conditions. Social learning infrastructure, communities of practice, peer coaching arrangements, and structured mentoring relationships that facilitate tacit knowledge transfer. Micro-learning resources, brief, focused learning modules accessible on demand that support just-in-time skill development. Formal development programs, structured courses and certification pathways for foundational capability building. Learning technology platforms, integrated systems that surface relevant learning resources based on individual skill profiles and organizational priorities. Amazon invested over $1.20 billion in upskilling programs through its Upskilling 2025 initiative, combining classroom instruction, on-the-job training, and tuition assistance for external credentials. The program specifically targets workers in roles facing automation pressure, providing pathways to higher skilled positions. One component, the Career Choice Program, prepays 95% of tuition for courses in high demand fields, regardless of whether skills relate to Amazon roles, recognizing that general capability development benefits both workers and the organization through enhanced adaptability. AT&T confronted dramatic skill transformation as its business evolved from traditional telecommunications towards software and cloud services. The company created AT&T University, combining online learning platforms with local training centers, and implemented comprehensive skill assessments to help employees identify development pathways. The initiative provided workers clear visibility into which skills would remain relevant versus become obsolete, enabling informed career planning. AT&T reports that filling 40% of management positions through internal mobility following these investments, compared to predominantly external hiring previously. Distributed learning architectures. Centralized training functions struggle to achieve the velocity and specificity required for contemporary skill transformation. Evidence increasingly supports distributed learning models, where capability development becomes embedded in workflow and distributed across organizational levels. Characteristics of distributed learning architectures. Manager as coach frameworks, equipping frontline managers with coaching skills and protected time for employee development conversations. Peer learning networks, formalizing lateral knowledge transfer through structured peer teaching, learning circles, and expertise marketplaces. In workflow learning integration, embedding learning prompts, performance support tools, and reflective practices directly into operational processes. Democratized content creation, enabling subject matter experts throughout the organization to create and share learning resources rather than relying exclusively on central instructional design teams. Research on workplace learning demonstrates that 70% of skill development occurs through on the job experience, 20% through social interactions, and 10% through formal instruction, though these proportions vary by skill type and learner characteristics. National Research Council, 2012. Effective distributed architectures deliberately orchestrate all three modalities. Mercy Health System redesigned its clinical education model to address rapid evolution in treatment protocols and medical technologies. Rather than relying solely on centralized continuing education, the health system trained nurse managers in facilitation skills and allocated protected time for unit-based learning activities. Clinical units establish weekly huddles where staff share recent learning from challenging cases, new research, or process improvements. The distributed model reduced time to competency for new protocols by 40% compared to the previous centralized approach, while improving knowledge retention. Technology-enabled personalized learning. Advances in learning technology enable increasingly personalized development experiences tailored to individual skill gaps, learning preferences, and career aspirations. Evidence suggests that adaptive learning systems that adjust content difficulty and sequencing based on learner performance generate stronger outcomes than one-size-fits-all approaches. Effective technology-enabled learning strategies. Adaptive learning platforms, systems that assess current capabilities and dynamically adjust learning pathways based on demonstrated proficiency. AI-powered skill gap analysis, tools that analyze role requirements, individual skill profiles, and learning histories to generate personalized development recommendations. Virtual reality skill practice. Immersive simulations enabling safe practice of high stakes or rare scenarios difficult to replicate in authentic contexts. Learning analytics dashboards. Data visualizations helping learners and managers track progress, identify obstacles, and celebrate achievements. Mobile first delivery. Designing learning experiences for smartphone access to support learning during distributed time periods rather than requiring dedicated blocks. Walmart deployed virtual reality training across 4,700 plus US stores to prepare employees for challenging scenarios, including holiday rush management and technology system failures. The immersive approach enabled practice of skills that occur infrequently but require rapid, confident execution. Walmart reported improved confidence scores and reduced performance anxiety during actual high pressure situations following VR training exposure, with particular benefits for newer employees lacking experiential reference points. Financial and benefit supports. Economic barriers frequently impede skill development, particularly for lower wage workers. Organizations that provide financial support for capability building demonstrate stronger engagement and retention outcomes. Research indicates that tuition assistance and skill development benefits rank among the most valued total rewards components for workers under age 40. Approaches to financial skill development support. Comprehensive tuition assistance, covering education costs for degree programs and professional certifications, often including non-role specific credentials. Paid learning time, providing protected hours during work schedules for development activities rather than requiring off hours participation. Micro credentialing support, funding shorter duration certifications and digital badges that validate specific competencies. Learning resource subscriptions, providing organizational access to online learning platforms, professional publications, and digital libraries. Development stipends, offering annual skill development allocations that employees direct toward learning resources of their choosing. Starbucks College Achievement Plan provides full tuition coverage for bachelor's degrees through Arizona State University's online programs, available to employees working 20-plus hours weekly. The program explicitly supports any major, rather than restricting to business-relevant fields, recognizing that general educational advancement develops foundational capabilities transferable across contexts. Starbucks reports that participants demonstrate higher retention rates and increased internal promotion rates compared to non-participants, with many promoted while completing degrees. Building long-term organizational learning capacity. Continuous skill intelligence systems. Reactive responses to skill gaps prove insufficient in contexts of accelerating change. Organizations require systematic capability to detect emerging skill requirements and obsolescence patterns before performance consequences manifest. Components of effective skill intelligence systems. External labor market monitoring, tracking skill demand trends across job postings, salary data, and competitor hiring patterns to anticipate capability requirements. Internal skill inventory maintenance, regularly updating records of workforce capabilities through assessments, project assignments, and credentialing. Technology horizon scanning, monitoring emerging tools and platforms likely to reshape skill requirements in core operational domains. Customer and stakeholder feedback integration, analyzing client requests, complaint patterns, and satisfaction data for signals of capability gaps. Predictive skill modeling, utilizing workforce analytics to forecast future skill gaps based on retirement projections, growth plans, and technology adoption roadmaps. These intelligence functions prove most effective when integrated into strategic planning cycles rather than relegated to human resources departments. Research on organizational learning demonstrates that cross-functional teams combining HR, operations, technology, and strategy perspectives generate more comprehensive skill requirement forecasts than any single function operating independently. Psychological safety and learning orientation. Skill transformation inherently involves acknowledging current inadequacies and risking failure during learning attempts. Organizational climates that punish mistakes or stigmatize help-seeking undermine capability development, regardless of available resources. Research demonstrates that psychological safety, team members' shared belief that the group is safe for interpersonal risk-taking, predicts learning behaviors including asking questions, seeking feedback, discussing errors, and experimenting with new approaches. Teams with high psychological safety demonstrate faster skill acquisition and superior adaptation to changing requirements. Practices that strengthen psychological safety for skill development. Leadership vulnerability modeling. Leaders sharing their own learning struggles and skill gaps normalizes development needs and reduces stigma. Intelligent failure celebration. Distinguishing productive experiments from preventable mistakes and recognizing learning from well designed attempts that generate negative results. Help seeking encouragement. Explicitly framing asking for assistance as professional strength rather than weakness. Feedback culture development. Training managers and peers in delivering developmental feedback focused on growth rather than judgment. Failure tolerance policies. Protecting employees from career consequences when taking approved developmental risks that don't achieve intended outcomes. Organizations can assess psychological safety through survey instruments and focus group discussions, then implement targeted interventions addressing identified deficits. Meta-analytic evidence demonstrates that psychological safety interventions generate significant improvements in team learning and performance outcomes. Purpose-driven development frameworks. Skill development efforts disconnected from meaningful purpose struggle to sustain motivation through the frustration and setbacks inherent in adult learning. Research on self-determination theory demonstrates that autonomy, competence, and relatedness needs shape intrinsic motivation for development activities. Approaches linking skill development to purpose. Career pathing transparency. Clearly articulating how specific capabilities enable progression toward roles aligned with individual aspirations. Societal impact connection. Helping workers understand how their skill development contributes to organizational mission and broader social value creation. Autonomy in development planning. Providing employees agency in selecting which capabilities to develop and which learning approaches to pursue within defined boundaries. Skills-based volunteering. Creating opportunities to apply developing capabilities in pro bono or community service contexts that reinforce purpose connection. Development cohort communities. Organizing learning groups around shared interests or career aspirations to strengthen relatedness and mutual support. Research examining the relationship between purposeful work and employee outcomes reveals that workers who perceive their roles as meaningful demonstrate higher engagement, stronger performance, and greater resilience during organizational changes. Newman et al., 2017. These benefits extend to skill development contexts, where purpose connection predicts sustained effort and deeper learning. Organizations serving clear social missions, healthcare, education, environmental sustainability, possess inherent advantages in connecting skill development to purpose. However, any organization can strengthen these linkages by helping workers understand connections between their capabilities, organizational performance, and stakeholder value creation. Conclusion. Skill transformation represents not a temporary disruption, but an enduring feature of contemporary organizational life. The evidence reviewed demonstrates that skill requirements have changed by 25% since 2015 and may change by 65% by 2030, with technical competencies experiencing particularly rapid obsolescence. These shifts generate measurable consequences for both organizational performance and individual well-being, including reduced innovation capacity, higher turnover, increased psychological distress, and wage stagnation. Organizations that proactively address skill transformation through evidence-based interventions demonstrate superior adaptation outcomes. Effective responses share several characteristics. They make skill requirements transparent rather than obscure. They provide integrated ecosystems of learning opportunities rather than isolated training events. They distribute learning responsibility throughout the organization rather than centralizing it. They remove financial and temporal barriers to development, and they connect capability building to meaningful purpose. The organizational examples presented, spanning Deloitte's skill mapping initiative, Amazon's upskilling investments, AT&T's learning architecture, Mercy Health's distributed education model, Walmart's virtual reality training, and Starbucks tuition support, demonstrate that evidence-based skill development approaches prove feasible across diverse industry contexts and organizational scales. Looking forward, organizational skill development capacity will increasingly differentiate competitive performance. The most successful organizations will move beyond reactive training responses toward systematic capability intelligence, creating early warning systems for emerging skill requirements and obsolescence patterns. They will embed learning directly into operational workflows rather than treating it as separate from productive work. And they will cultivate psychological safety and purpose connection that sustain motivation through the inevitable frustrations of continuous learning. For practitioners navigating these challenges, several actionable principles emerge from the evidence. Start with systematic assessment. Invest in rigorous skill mapping before designing interventions. Intuition based approaches consistently underperform empirical methods. Design for integration. Combine experiential, social, and formal learning modalities rather than relying exclusively on any single approach. Remove barriers. Address financial, temporal, and psychological obstacles that prevent engagement regardless of program quality. Distribute responsibility. Equip managers and peers with coaching capabilities rather than centralizing all development functions. Connect to purpose. Help workers understand how their capability development contributes to meaningful outcomes beyond narrow job requirements. Create feedback loops. Implement systems to detect skill gaps early and assess intervention effectiveness systematically. Skill transformation challenges organizations and individuals alike. The evidence demonstrates, however, that organizations willing to invest systematically in capability development, guided by empirical research rather than intuition, can navigate these challenges successfully while enhancing both competitive performance and employee well being.